Hey everyone, Deb here with Heart Centered Use Daily Dose. It is Wednesday Wisdom, and we are continuing with Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. And today we are tackling the 3rd agreement: don't make assumptions. All right, so what I love about all of his agreements is they are very simple and direct, but oh man, they are kind of hard to actually apply to our lives. But I'm going to go through this and give you guys what I feel like are some really powerful tools to really kind of change the game as far as how you look at your own behavior and how you own the decisions that you make. All right, so who's with me? Okay. All right, so this whole concept surrounds the fact that we have amazing imaginations, okay? And this serves us really well in so many aspects of life. But the problem with this is those imaginations also create a lot of assumptions about behavior when we need answers, when we need to fill in the gaps. And we tend to try and do that on our own. All right, but what this leads to is taking behavior personally, blaming others, and then what Don Miguel Ruiz says is reacting with this emotional poison with our word. Okay, we start having misunderstanding, we start fighting, and then we also have a lot of inner turmoil of resentment and jealousy and loss and frustration. Okay, so all of this can be avoided, but we have to take some ownership. So let's, see how this plays out. I'll give you an example, and I think it's one that many can identify with. Relationships. We tend to make the assumption that our partners, knowing us really well, should automatically know how to react to a situation, how to respond to us, how to say and do and feel certain things based on knowing us as well as they do. And we equate them loving us or them caring about us or them listening to us with how well they innately follow this code that we've put on them. So it's, I resent this person because I keep having to remind them to take the trash out. They're a bad listener because I have to remind them. Or they don't really care about me like they say they do because they're not able to show up for me in the way that I've asked them to. And we make these contracts about what certain things mean to us, and they become assumptions about how people should and shouldn't behave. Okay? So the biggest assumption here is really that everybody sees the world the way I do, right? We don't even know we do it, but we do it all the time. We assume things about people's behavior because if it were us, we would do it differently, And what I think is really important here, and I wrote down some notes, as I was kind of free writing this whole concept, this came out, and I think that it's a very important mantra for all of us to listen to and to say to ourselves. So I don't want to get it wrong, even though it's from me. Assumptions are just our ego's way of trying to explain behavior that we don't understand. Okay? Assumptions are just our ego's way of trying to explain behavior we don't understand. Okay? So what that means is that we tend to think way too much, and we tend to only have conversations with our inner voice. We have an inner dialogue about what behavior means. All right, and we've got to stop doing that. We've got a job. We have 2 things. When we start to make assumptions, we've got to stop having that inner dialogue. Okay, we got to stop thinking so much about what that means and filling in those blanks ourselves. Okay, so you got to have that awareness that that's happening. And then second, you got to start asking questions, okay? When you don't understand something, or when you feel like you're automatically doing an if-then, you need to take a time out, and ask that person, hey, I'm feeling really hurt by what you just said. Was that your intention? Or I wrote some down. When you said this, what was your true desire? What were you hoping to have come by that? Or, in my experience, when someone says X, it means Y. Is that true in this scenario? Okay, we need to start gathering evidence so that we're not creating our own story. Okay, so that brings me to this next piece, that assumptions create our reality. They just do. Okay, you believe what you say to yourself, and you create those if-thens based on the lens with which you see the world. So when you assume X and you believe it to be true, you're essentially training your brain to actually find more evidence to prove your narrative. Okay, so I'll give you an example. You've got a friend and they make a comment and you feel judged. Okay, there's no right or wrong, it's how you feel. They made a comment, you feel judged, but you don't say anything and you don't ask questions to get clear. You just take it in. Now, what happens is every time you're around that person, your brain is actually hardwired to look for more judgmental behavior to make that initial judgment true. You are going to constantly try to prove that that person is the way you assumed them to be. Okay? I think we can all remember times, if we actually look back on it, that we've done that. So instead of taking behavior and creating an independent situation and asking about it, we just layer and layer and layer, and we let that person prove this total false reality because our ego needs it to be true, because we made that initial assumption. It's a vicious cycle. Okay, so I really want to just, let that all sink in. Okay, it's kind of a big ask, but we have these unconscious tendencies of letting our egos run wild and going down that rabbit hole of assumption. And it really is as easy as just catching yourself in the act, stopping that inner dialogue, and starting the dialogue with the person that it's involved with. And you guys, I know it can be really hard to have those conversations, and I'm always working on this. It's hard to admit to people that they hurt you. It's hard to admit that maybe you're sensitive and that things hurt you that maybe you think shouldn't, but they did. But you got to be honest about that. And there's one more thing. Assumptions are efficient. They're our brain's way of saving time, right? It's an easy way to connect the dots, but they're not actually truthful most of the time. And so while you can save time assuming, you can save relationships. You can save yourself so much frustration and heartache if you actually invest your time in seeking the truth, not just saving time assuming. Okay? So take those nuggets with you, comment below. I want to continue this conversation because this is a hard thing to do, but it is such an impactful, such a game-changing way to start owning your relationships and owning your own inner peace and happiness. All right? I know sometimes we want it to be other people's responsibilities. If they only did this more or did this less, we'd have better relationships. But by taking the ownership, it empowers you to make those calls and to have ownership over your own life and your own boundaries and your own decisions and ultimately your own happiness. So stay in your joy, do this work, let it empower you, and continue having this conversation and sharing your wins and sharing your growth with everyone around you. We all need it. Mwah. Namaste.